Welcome to the first podcast episode of Trust the Badge. In this episode, if Chief Riggs could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is James Riggs, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Chief of Police in the city of Altamonte Springs.
Great. So, first question: what encouraged you to become an officer, and do you have any specific example or story?
In my early 20s, I realized how much I enjoyed helping other people. And there were a number of occasions when, even before that in high school, I had opportunity to help people that really were in need. And I got some just measure of satisfaction instead of focusing on what I was interested in, focusing on other people just helped me feel fulfilled. So from there, I happened to run into a couple of deputies that were on a pop squad with the Orange County Sheriff's Office. They were great people. They took me on a ride along and they really opened my eyes to the new opportunity. So I found a way to have some excitement, some enjoyment, and really get fulfilled by helping other people. Well, that's kind of how it got my start.
That sounds great. How long have you been in law enforcement?
Oh my gosh, 27 years. And
Wow.
it's been, yeah, it's been a long time, but it's been a great time.
Wow. Thank you. That's a lot of years to serve. Also, with your job, do you often communicate with the public in the community?
Yeah, I make it a point to do so as much as I can. The truth of the matter is we're here to serve the community, and what's important to them has to be important to us. How are we going to know what's important to them unless we communicate? So at every
That's
opportunity to sit down and chat, at first I seek to understand. I want to know what their thoughts are, what their views are, what their perspectives are, and then I try to share some of my feedback as well.
Yeah, of course. Do you have any stories that you like to share, like regarding your connection and appreciation with like the community and the public?
Well, there have been a number of times that we've gone to formal meetings where we'll have a neighborhood watch program, or maybe people will come by to the commission chambers. And those are always great because it gives us a chance to speak to a broader audience. But I will tell you, the most meaningful connection has been one on one conversations. Just sitting down at someone's house for a cup of coffee, or maybe they join me in the park and we just sit down on the bench and they tell me what's really on their mind. More often than not, we get very positive feedback, but when we don't, it's important to know the reasoning behind it. So I'd say that the personal connections, the one on one meetings, has probably been the most important to me.
That wow, one-on-one meetings. So is that like very often that you have those, or is it just like once in a while?
No, it's probably a 2 to 3 times a week. I just happen to go out in the community, and whether I'm again walking in the park or I'm strolling by a business, or even if somebody comes by my office to sit down and talk, it happens pretty often. So several times a week, I get that opportunity.
That sounds great. As especially the police chief, you need to communicate with the public more. Yeah, it's really important, I think. Do you think that kind of connection has like been stronger recently?
I would say it has. We enjoy a solid amount of support in our community, and that's probably tied into the culture we've developed. We've had it for decades. We believe in treating others with dignity and respect. That's not to say we don't hold people accountable when they do something wrong. Our,
Of
our,
course.
our responsibility is to the people who would be victimized without us standing in the way of a violent or predatory type person. So we certainly believe in holding folks accountable when they try to impose their will against the will of another. But even in doing so with some of the worst people that you'd have the misfortune of interacting with, it is done with dignity and respect. There is nothing personal. There is no um, agenda that has to be filled. It is about keeping the community safe and giving people an opportunity to be held accountable and perhaps change their path, move into a new, more positive direction.
That's a great way to do it. So in public, when you're in your uniform, how does the public treat you differently versus when you're out of your uniform?
People they stop and they'll look at you certainly more often. And it's usually just curiosity. You know, sometimes they'll approach you and have a conversation. You're out of uniform, just spending time with my family. You're much more anonymous, and you're just one of the faces in the crowd. But when you do have the uniform on, people tend to to stop and look what you're up to, and again, sometimes they'll engage conversation, but uh, usually it's just kind of looking at you, looking in your direction.
Oh, okay. And could you describe, like, do you get more appreciation or more like comments when you're out in public with your uniform?
Oh, by far, we get more appreciation, especially in contrast to some of the other things you see with the national narrative, where people feel disrespected or mistreated or misunderstood. Again, it's part of our core principles where we really want to engage people in positive, meaningful ways. And the respect component is certainly the building block for everything else.
Yeah, I'm really glad that I hear that people are more appreciative to you guys. I definitely think that's more needed throughout the national level. Yeah, that's a great thing that I like to hear. And how do you think the public and media misunderstand about policing?
I think oftentimes you'll get little sound bites about what occurred. You'll get portions of the truth, but you won't get the complete picture. And sometimes we're a little too quick to judge on partial information, especially if it's somewhat sensational. We just we take that easy clickbait, and instead of going through the challenge of due diligence or looking for an opportunity to find another side of the story, we just kind of take a shortcut and perhaps even an easy way out and say, oh, well, that's what was said. That must be what happened. When more often than not, I would bet you that's not what actually happened.
Yeah, that's really true. Do you know any specific events that you could probably
I dare not relate it to specific events because a lot of them end up being tried in the social arena or in the media. And if there is criminal or civil litigation that would occur, I don't want to weigh in on something that could impact the cases. So regrettably, I'll just have to stay a little general with that. But I think those sentiments can be applied pretty broadly when you just turn on the news and you'll see a story or two that I imagine what I said would be applicable.
Wow, that's crazy. How does so this misunderstanding about policing and like this huge hate media, how does hate media affect this misunderstanding?
Well, I think it's too much of it kind of relates back to my earlier answer. People will take a shortcut and they'll come to a conclusion, or perhaps they've had a bad or negative interaction in the past. And if that's the case, I think that they should be given an opportunity to be listened to. Um, One of the challenges that men and women in law enforcement run into is kind of ironic. You hear oftentimes, don't don't stereotype. We all know it's improper to stereotype. It is prejudicial in nature, and it is blatantly wrong. And here's the irony: that oftentimes, when one officer from no matter what part of the country does something wrong, other officers get stereotyped and painted with a broad brush. That's regrettable because as long as we employ human beings, mistakes are going to be made. And that doesn't matter what profession, whether it's a doctor, a lawyer, a, a mechanic, it doesn't matter. As human beings, we often fall short of the mark. The important thing is that we strive to become better, and more responsible and more capable and more engaged. In the criminal justice profession, it's the engagement is in the community, finding out what's important to them, and then truly serving them because that is our responsibility.
That is a big point. Like really, you see all these small events, police brutality, police messing up on something. I don't think that those small cases should represent the majority of policing, which I'm sure that you'd agree to. But at the same time, there's also the media, which shows like very small parts of what actually happened to make it look worse than what actually happened.
Yeah, I'd like to address two points there. So first, I'll address the last comment you made, and I think we all know that the media has a business model built upon sensationalism. They can get you to feel a strong emotion, especially if it's a negative emotion. You will come back to their channel or their page, and you will return over and over and over again. And for some reason, people are less interested in favorable things or good things or kind-hearted things. They get drawn back to drama, to negative associations. And the news media, I'm sure, takes advantage of that. And that's why they portray things in somewhat sensational ways. Instead of telling both sides of the story, which would have people more likely saying, oh, okay, well, now I understand. They'll tell a portion of the story, which evokes pretty strong negative emotions. And then that's, again, part of their business model. The other part is
Yeah, of course. That I know you can continue.
So the other part is about some of the inappropriate things that have been done by members of my profession. This one I will speak about specifically because the case is done. George Floyd. I was sick to my stomach in watching what was done, and I cannot in any way, shape, or form condone that type of inappropriate behavior. I don't know if he was just so desensitized. I don't know the officer. I never have and probably never will meet him. So it's not fair to say what was in his heart or what was in his mind. But the actions that I saw, the behavior that I saw, it sickened me. And the community has a right to be upset about the representatives of the community that are there to protect them when they abuse that trust. Uh, so the challenge is when it goes too far, when you say, okay, well, one cop did something bad, all cops are bad. That's where it becomes problematic, and we lose some of the rational dialogue at that level.
Yeah, on your last comment, that's a big common misunderstanding that if one officer does this, then probably most likely every other officer does. Going back to the George Floyd incident, you're definitely right. That officer, I don't know what was going through him, but of course, I'm not saying what he did was right, but every human is still a human. So
Yeah.
everyone still has their own kind of mistakes and hiccups, but definitely that officer wasn't in the right mind, I think, but he shouldn't be representing every single other officer in this nation.
Yeah.
And after George Floyd, big things came up like defund the police. And I want to bring this question up to you. What does defund the police mean to you?
Well, there are a number of political figures who have spoken to that very directly, and it seems to change at different times depending on the polling and depending on the temperament. That's from the things that I've heard from many of these political figures and some other prominent people. It means that they want to take money away. They want to have fewer cops. Some of them want to have no cops. They want to turn the majority of the budget over to social services, and they don't trust the protection that their law enforcement community provides. So I guess they have a better idea. They want to protect themselves, or they want to go to the root of some of the issues, which to me that does make sense. Um, Perhaps they want to deal with mental health concerns, and the belief is if I resolve that issue, then I won't have to worry about the safety or well-being of the person because that's just symptom to a greater problem. And I most certainly agree with that. Although I think it's irresponsible. More than that, I think it's immature to think that those are separate things. You can have one or the other. In my opinion, it's both.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on this point, but the police shouldn't be defunded. Um, this is a general question, but why shouldn't the police be defunded in from your point of view?
Well, I think the evidence is pretty blatant. You take a look at all those communities that were clamoring about defund the police. You take a look at New York City, where they did away with some of the protections that are inherent in the responsibility associated with law enforcement. And you can answer that. Any one of your listeners can answer that. How much has the crime rate gone up? And not just the overall crime rate, even focus on horrific violent crime, sexual battery, homicide. Every one of those cases holds a victim and the victim's family. So the social harm that has been done by some of those efforts is unconscionable. It's inexcusable, and the communities that voted for the politicians that approved those types of measures are reeling in anguish because of it.
Yeah, that's a great point to be made. I'm sure everyone can agree on this, including my listeners, hopefully. Um, I really try to make this project so that point can obviously be made. The police shouldn't be defunded. A lot of people also have different opinions and different meanings of defund. Some people say defund as in lessen the money that's being funded towards policing, and then some think defund means just to remove the police completely.
Yeah, that seems to be the moving target. It depends on what audience they're talking to, and it depends on the polling. Is that a popular thing to say at the time, or is it less popular? At the height of the riots and the protests, it was said loud and clear and repeatedly. Matter of fact, one particular congresswoman said, "When I said defund the police, that's exactly what I meant: defund the police." But now, as we get closer to the political season and people are up for re-election, they're taking a softer approach. Not to mention, you look around at their different communities that have suffered greatly because of that approach. I imagine that the consequences of their decisions are coming home to roost, if you will.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know you can't speak for every single police department there is in the US, but if you could share, how is the funding toward the police categorized?
Well, in my respective community, it's fair and it's reasonable. We keep the service in mind, and we take a look at the resources that are necessary, human resources and otherwise, to keep the community safe first and foremost. Beyond that, they need to be free of the fear of crime. So by that I mean they should be able to sleep at night comfortably without worrying about somebody kicking in their door and victimizing their family. They should be able to walk from their car to a restaurant with the family for a nice evening out without the fear of being attacked along the way. So we take a look at the funding necessary to create that environment, create a safe driving environment, and other aspects, of course. And we also have fiscal responsibility in mind. These are taxpayer dollars. These are families that contribute to our local government so that they can have the services. It is not an open checkbook. It is not daddy's credit card where I can go on a shopping spree. We have to be fiscally responsible because we have to be good stewards of the public money. So I feel locally we find a fair balance of that. And and it's usually reflected in some of the comments that we get from other people in the community. Now, beyond that, my friend, I cannot speak intelligently about how it affects larger cities or other states. I just don't have the exposure or the experience to speak about that.
About that. That meant um, in your department or in general, do you think there should be more funding allocated to policing, or do you think that the amount of money that is already being funded toward policing is good enough?
I'm comfortable with our present status. Every year we submit a budget to our city manager for review, and ultimately it goes to our commission and our mayor. And they are very reasonable in their approach. Now we have a responsibility from the police department side to articulate the need and the reason for the need. And when it comes to public safety, it we don't have challenges. Our entire leadership team, our elected body in Altamont Springs is they're very responsible, they're very reasonable, and they're very committed to the betterment of this community. So we really don't have any challenges. And again, this is a recurring on an annual basis. So it's been more than fair from my perspective.
Of course, yeah. After myself knowing the police officers at Altamont Springs as well, they're all great people. They're all great officers. I think they're all doing their jobs correctly. Um, and now going to their perspectives, I know that you're chief of the police, but do you think those specific police officers are underpaid?
No, I'm proud to say that um, we don't have that challenge. We've done an environmental survey for the salary and associated benefits of people within the region, and I'm glad to tell you that they're on the upper scale, and that's because they earn it. Their work ethic, their commitment to others, their unwavering respect for the community, they earn it. I'm actually, as we're speaking, I'm looking at uh, calls for service, things that are happening in the community right now, and they are busy, and that's pretty consistent. Whether they're assigned to road patrol or they're detectives or they're in our community oriented police section, there's not uh, there's not a lot of free time. It isn't sitting around the coffee pot and propping up your feet. When you're at work, you're working, and all of the efforts are for the betterment of the community. So I am proud of them, and I am proud to say that they are well compensated for the hard work that they put forth.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that your department isn't struggling with those kind of issues. That's really great to hear. Knowing that you're a 27-year veteran of law enforcement, which I'm greatly thankful for. Is there anything ever since you signed up that has turned out to be unexpected?
Yeah, I was a 22-year-old young man when I began, and the most difficult part, the unexpected part, was the pain associated with uh, the injury or loss of life to a young child. Their innocence, their inability to complete a fulfilled life, the pain caused by the family. I didn't expect it to impact me so much, and throughout the years, it that has occurred. So everything else, I came in eyes wide open, and I had reasonable expectations about what would or would not occur. I just didn't see that with the loss of young life.
Wow, that must be really deep for you. I'm sure that throughout your years, you've definitely tried to combat that. You definitely try to help with that.
Yeah, it's the time spent improving other young lives. There are some great programs that focus on the kids in our community and beyond. So what we do is we realize that it has been a loss, and we wrap our arms around the family any way we can. We seek justice for the family, and we provide them with resources and support at every step that we're able. But beyond that, we have to focus on the ones that are here. There are still plenty of youth in our community that must know they are valued, and they are cared for, and they are important. So we have a school resource officer in every one of our schools. And first and foremost, we want to keep the kids safe. Beyond that, we want to interact with them, and we want to be sure that we are reinforcing the intrinsic value that each of those kids hold. So we do spend a little time on the negative because it's a difficult reality with our profession. But then we spend even more time on the positive, and we do our best to shape young lives.
Wow, that's great to hear. If you could share, within your many years of experience, do you have like any examples of that kind of problem that you try to combat?
Yeah. When I was a much younger officer, probably in my mid 20s, we were looking for a missing child, and we we checked every area that we could think of. We went into lakes and ponds, and we went into, you know, wooded areas where they may have gotten lost, and regrettably, when we found the child, it wasn't the best outcome, and they had been harmed. And I will tell you that night I went home, and I stuck my head in the toilet, and the pain of of that loss, seeing the family and the loved ones, and the youth and the innocence, the absolute unnecessary loss of a wonderful innocent life. Um, it was extraordinarily difficult. So we focused our energy on holding people accountable. We focused our energy on improving circumstances so that it didn't happen again. And I am so glad to say that we did get justice for that family, and we did implement some things in the area where it was less likely to occur. So, as painful as that was, it's nothing compared to the loss that the family felt, and it had to be turned into a lesson. How do we make it better for others? And I've seen that play out, my friend, time and time again from other people. They take that negative energy and they turn it into something that will benefit other lives. And that other centeredness is inspiring to me because I've seen it from parent after parent, family after family, loved one after loved one. And they work through those difficult things, and as best they can, they turn something dark into light.
Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that. I hope I didn't bring any bad memories for you. Just knowing about what happened to you, especially then, in the future, how would you like the image of policing to be changed? For example, like what actions do you think should be taken?
That's a challenging question that I'm not quite sure how to answer. You see, there are other agencies, there are other communities um, that are have a different dynamic than I experience in mine. I I do think the core of the relationship between officers and the community is about respect. You know, there was a wonderful quote by Maya Angelou. I'm going to change it just a little bit because I think it's relevant to our conversation.
Of course.
People won't remember um, if you were right or if you were wrong. They won't remember what you said. They won't remember what you did. They will remember how you made them feel. So as we interact with people, I think it's important to make them feel as though they're heard or they're respected, and that even includes the people that are being held accountable. I'm not saying that you have to pander or placate. I'm not saying that you have to be inauthentic or in any way, I guess, naive. What I'm saying is, while you interact with people, you don't have to treat them poorly. You do have to hold people accountable when mistakes are made, no question about it, but you don't treat them poorly in the process. And as they walk away from the interaction, if sometimes it just won't happen, some people will not accept responsibility for what they've done, and it'll be everyone else's fault and not theirs. But there are still a percentage of people that you can hold accountable in dignified ways where they'll walk away and they will remember that dignity that they maintained in interacting with the officer. So I think that the large part depends upon the officers, and when they talk with the public, when they walk with the public, when they interact with the public, treat them well, and there will be, I'd say, considerable appreciation for the way they're made to feel.
That makes a lot of sense. Is there anything that you would? Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I appreciate you. I appreciate the time and the energy and the effort that you're putting into something that is clearly important to you. I think young lives and sharp minds like yours impact our future in wonderful ways. And the way that you with curiosity you look at a situation and you try to find out exactly what's happening from multiple angles, right? You contextualize things, you look at the whole picture, and instead of decontextualizing where you withdraw certain or exvert certain um, bits of data or information, you try to get a broader understanding. And I appreciate the way you have done that with this project and with other areas. It shows that you're conscientious. It shows that you care, and that, I tell you, my friend, that is wonderful to see. It gives all of us hope as you take over the leadership roles in our future. We will definitely be in good hands. So I'll just close by telling you I appreciate you.
Thank you very much. That meant a lot to me. This project especially is supposed to change that view of, policing. I think it's very important in our community, and in the public. I see on the news all the time. I think it's something that should be definitely tackled. So yes, definitely. Thank you for making time to come to this interview. Thought it was very impactful. It definitely had a lot to do with what's going in the public right now, the publicity of policing, the status quo, all of that. So yeah, thank you.
Definitely, for sure.
Thank you, everyone that tuned in for this first episode of Trust the Badge. Again, this episode consists of me, Jaser Talpov, interviewing Chief James Riggs of the Altamonte Springs Police Department in Florida. If everyone could please follow this podcast, follow the Instagram page, which is Trust the Badge, and trustthebadge.com. Please stay tuned for more updates and another episode. Thank you very much.